Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar sponsored by the CTE Technical Assistance Center of New York. A few points before we begin: all attendees are initially muted. We will take comments and questions throughout the webinar. To pose a question, click the raise your hand icon and you will be announced and unmuted. You may also submit a question to be addressed by typing it into the questions pane on the control panel. All questions are logged and unanswered questions will be addressed by today's presenters via email. If you become disconnected, please call 518-723-2137.
Hello. Gretchen?
Hold on one second.
Are you on the call?
Yes.
Okay.
For your information and reference, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the CTE Technical Assistance Center website at nyctecenter.org within 72 hours. If you have questions or suggestions regarding upcoming webinars, please contact us at ctetac@spnet.us.
Gretchen, thank you. We'll have to be careful to put you on mute, right, for the feedback. I'd like to welcome everybody this afternoon to the next in our series. This is on Element 5. This is actually the 6th webinar that we've done in talking about the Career Instructional Model. My panelist today is Vicki Davis, and I'm going to be introducing Vicki a little bit later on, but welcome, Vicki, and thank you for joining us in this particular webinar. As Gretchen said, we want to make this interactive, so as you've got some questions as you go along, please indicate the raise your hand button, and you can pose a question of myself or Vicki as we get into talking about this topic of empower students with hope and confidence. As we've done in previous webinars, we've elaborated on these 6 elements of the Career Instructional Model, which has been developed as part of the Successful Practices Network, and sharing these with teachers is a way that they can begin to think about these essential elements of instruction that really make a difference in making students career ready. This model places a focus on getting students ready for their future and not our past. It really addresses the characteristics of both college and career readiness and what it really enables students to be successful. And for those of you that are familiar with the rigor relevance framework and quadrant D learning that represents high rigor, high relevance, one of the ways that you get students to those kinds of rigorous experiences is through these same elements of this model. It reflects what we know about brain research, and it also applies to all disciplines. And it can be data-driven, and I'll talk about that at the end of the webinar for those of you that haven't tried out one of our surveys for teachers to reflect on their own instruction. In the previous webinars, we've talked about connecting with relevance, assessing for proficiency, rewarding creativity and innovation. Last week we talked about engaging students as independent learners. And today's topic really extends into the next one of empowering students with hope and confidence. The one-page handout, if you haven't gotten a copy of this, becomes a convenient reference to the model and all of the actions that teachers can and should take to implement that. And you can download a copy of that from the Technical Assistance Center website or specifically from this URL. We've also created a Twitter feed called Career Model. So those of you that are on Twitter may find this a useful way that will continue to share resources and practices that relate to the model. Our agenda today is to focus on this one particular element. I'm going to review the element up front and then engage in Vicki sharing some of the teaching practices that she's used and about adding this particular element. In each of these sessions, we've tried to make it more interactive by watching a background video piece in advance. And in preparation for this one, I recorded an interview with colleague Angela Mayers from Iowa that does a nice job of describing how important this is to think about your role as a teacher as really empowering students. Traditionally, we convey a message to students: stay in school and get a degree or a diploma, and then you'll can find a way that you can make a contribution in the world. But we have to take advantage of an opportunity of really getting students to recognize that they can make a difference today with the talents and gifts that they have. So if you haven't seen that video, I hope that you will take a look at that. I have a few poll questions, and let me just ask the first poll question. How many of you had a chance to take a look at that video with Angela? So up on your screen is a quick poll question. Would you answer either yes or no? And we can see how many of you actually took advantage of seeing that webinar or that video. About 50%, so 53% did see that. Hope that the rest of you will take advantage of watching that, and it provides a nice background to what we're going to talk about today. You may be interested in learning more about Angela's work, and the two books that she's written provide some great specifics from her teaching experience and other teachers in the kinds of practices that she's seen within the classroom. She also is an avid Twitter user and provides extensive resources through that professional development vehicle. Before I talk with Vicki, let me just review what we mean by empower with hope and confidence and describe the 5 actions that really encompass this particular element. This one is pretty full, and as I mentioned, it's a natural extension of the engagement element we talked about last week that begins with relationships and continues on to the kinds of practices that effective teachers really do to engage their students. You could think about this Empower one as taking it to the next level of really building a classroom environment where students are excited and passionate about their learning. Within this element, the first one talks about developing social-emotional skills. Been a lot of literature the last few years recognizing how important this is, not to just let students' social-emotional development evolve, but to really be proactive in the kinds of things that we do within the classroom, to have students reflect on their own skills in these areas, to interact effectively socially, and to control their own emotions in a way that it becomes positive to their learning environment. Another one is about developing a growth mindset. We want students to recognize that their achievement comes primarily from their ability to continue to put forth some effort. It's not some innate aspect of intelligence. A side story that I might share, I have 2 young grandsons, and one of the things that my daughter has told me to do, and some things that I am told not to do, is to tell the boys that they are smart. When I see them doing something that deserves a compliment, is not to use for smartness, but to talk about that they were creative or that they worked hard. We often create an illusion for students that their smartness determines their success, and we need to develop a growth mindset in all children. The next action is to support students to improve their reflection and thinking. We often refer to this as metacognition. Do we have students move beyond just getting the right answer to think about how they went about arriving at that answer, and when they make mistakes or errors in judgment, to think about how they can improve that process? The 4th action is about making a difference and having students use their passion. This opens up the possibilities that learning is just not about acquiring knowledge and skills to use at some later time, but students really can make a difference today. And we hear remarkable stories today of some students that really are making a difference in their families, in their communities, in their schools, and we need to let students recognize that they can use their talents to make a difference in the world right away. And then finally, the next action is about stretching students' sense of community. Students grow up in some cases, very limited neighborhoods, particularly students that have fewer advantages and students that may be wealthier and get to travel and vacation a great deal. And part of our opportunity as educators is to how can we change this sense of community so it's more than just their neighborhood, and recognize their role in a larger community and in the world, and really making a difference. So these 5 actions really combine to address this element that we talk about, empower with hope and confidence. Let me just share a couple of resources that I've come across the last couple of years that really remind me about how much information there is for teachers that really want to address this particular element. There's a lot of authors out there that address the social emotional learning. One of those that I found most impressive is Mark Brackett in the Center for Emotional Intelligence at Yale University. Mark has a tool called the Ruler, which is a very simple measure of social emotional development, and has used this effectively with schools all across the country, and really becomes an excellent resource for teachers that really want to delve more deeply into the practices around social emotional learning. Another recent speaker and author is Angela Duckworth, who talks about the notion of grit. And this is related to this continuous improvement in recognizing that your success does not come just from intelligence. And Angela changed careers and began to think about what really determines success in her struggling middle school students. And now is a psychologist doing research on this notion of grit. Provides an excellent TED Talk. And Angela is someone worth getting to know in the research that she's doing. Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset, is another great resource that has expanded our thinking about this notion of how do we measure success and prepare students for success. And her popularity has grown into a large consulting business, building off the success of that book. But if you haven't read that book as a teacher, it is an excellent resource of changing our thinking and making sure that we reflect on our own language around students in how we ensure them of thinking about their own success. In the aspect of metacognition, I like the work of Habits of the Mind from Art Costa, Benekalik, for a number of years, have talked about having students develop a broad range of thinking skills and getting them to recognize the thinking that they're engaged in. That is so crucial to this aspect of problem solving, and getting students to recognize that they have some control over their thinking, that they really are the masters of their own learning. And that's when students develop confidence about moving forward. Two other groups I want to mention briefly. One is the National Youth Leadership Council, which is a national organization that's done an awful lot with community service and service learning. And one of the ways that we really stretch students' understanding of community is to get them engaged very early in aspects of service learning. And this is an organization that has really promoted that within hundreds of school districts across the country. And then the other one, which is another dimension of stretching our sense of community, is international connections. And there's a number of organizations that do that. One that I'm familiar with and followed for a long time is iEarn, which is really all about international student collaboration. There are problems that students engage in solving, but in order to solve that problem, they need to interact with students in a school in another nation. And it goes a long way to sharing understanding of the differences in geography and culture, in economics, that students develop a greater sense of community by participating in these projects, not just the intellectual work of solving those problems. So the end result of those projects is not only student learning, but the sense of community internationally that goes along with that. So those are some resources that kind of reinforce this notion about the actions. I want to get into the conversations with Vicki, but let me do a couple of quick polls about those actions before we do that. So thinking about those 5 actions, which one of these do you think would be most important in helping students to truly become career ready? If we said, well, all of those are important, but which one do you think will really make a difference for students in their future? So you should see it up on the screen. Pick which one of those you think is most important, and we'll see what the results are. There we've got the results pretty well spread. Really three at the significant first place, if you will. Developing students' social emotional skills, encouraging students to acquire a growth mindset, and igniting students' passion to use skills to make a difference. And the only one that's really lower than that is stretch students' sense of community and caring. Very interesting, pretty evenly split, indicating that all of those are pretty important. Let's go to the next polling question. Now let's think about the teacher's perspective. If teachers are going to do this, which one do you think is the greatest challenge for teachers to try and accomplish? So if you'll submit your answers on that. Again, a pretty good spread, but two of these clearly the greatest in terms of challenge to the teacher. Developing students' social emotional skills. Interesting. And igniting students' passion to use those skills to make a difference. I think those are both very important ones. Obviously, they're rated poor, and I think they are significant challenges. And they're, I think, the context of what we're doing in education, they are very tough for teachers to really try and emphasize that. And Vicki, maybe we can talk about that as we delve into some conversation about these. So with that as a background, let me formally introduce and welcome Vicki Davis. And then Vicki, I see I've spelled your name wrong on this slide. But thank you for joining us. Vicki is a teacher, author, technology director, blogger. Reading some of the things that you've written, Vicki, I'm amazed that you have time to even eat or sleep with all the things that you're engaged in. But I think that's an indication of a modern-day educator of all the things that you're doing. So welcome to this conversation this afternoon.
Now, this is a very important topic, and I'm really glad to be here with you.
This notion of putting this under the category of empowering students with hope and confidence, maybe a little different twist than what you're familiar with, but certainly the things that you've been doing as a teacher and leader in your district reflect that. Tell me a little bit about how you began to recognize that we need to teach in a way that really does empower students.
Well, this is my 13th year. And the first couple years, you know, let me back up a second. My mom was actually a typing teacher, and she actually taught in the same room where I teach now. So she's kind of my, she created a computer lab in 1991, and then there were a couple in between us, and then I kind of took back over. And of course, in the 90s, computers were still so new. It was a lot of point-and-click teaching, a lot of the book and the, you know, click here, point here, do that, type of paper, type a letter. And somewhere about my third or fourth year, I discovered Web 2 technologies, went to the GATC conference here in Georgia, kind of like the conferences that you have up there. And David Warlick spoke, learned a lot about all the different technologies, and I realized that I did not know a lot of this stuff, but that if I was going to bring my kids into the leading, bleeding edge, that they were going to have to be explorers with me. So I went back and didn't know much about wikis. I posted 8 Web 2 technology terms, created a wiki page, and I had the students create a wiki page together. And what happened was completely transformational. My first blog post, Wonderful World of Wiki Teaching, is still one of my most popular because the kids got so excited that they started building wikis to review for tests, and they started building wikis to collect all their AP Lit stuff. And literally kids were squealing in the hall so excited because, oh, this has been built or that's been built or we've created this. I'm like, what has happened? I mean, people have always been excited about technology. It's kind of cool. But what has happened that kids are so excited that they're squealing in the hall, excited about what's happened in my classroom? And, you know, we've got a saying that a lot of us who've done things like Flat Classroom and some other things say, once you go flat, you never go back. that when you start connecting kids and they start truly getting excited and you start realizing you don't have to be an expert on everything, it actually becomes very easy to unleash their passions. The interesting thing is, some of the only pushback I get is from people who don't really understand the best way to excite and ignite those passions. I've actually been told, I got criticism once, that the problem with my class was we didn't do enough worksheets. Then how did you know what kids were learning if they didn't do worksheets? And this was from a very traditional teacher who the kids are pretty bored when they go to this person's class, but they were saying that I needed to have worksheets. And then I had other criticism that I needed to teach 10 weeks of Microsoft Word and point and click. And I taught business letters in 2 days in 8th grade. They could type a business letter anytime they want. But it's interesting that most of the criticism that I do get, here locally or wherever, tends to come from other educators who have this view of what the classroom is supposed to look like. My classroom is a very noisy place. It's a very exciting place. The interesting thing is kids, like in my 9th grade, we've got a real exciting project I'll show you here in a minute called Gamified. They want to come in during study hall. My room is literally full during study hall and when I'm teaching class. Almost every computer is full. Even though I have 22 computers and only have 15 kids, every computer is full because they want to be in here all the time. And it's very exciting to have that happen.
Well, I think that's right. You know, the change in the technology.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay.
I can.
The change in the technology is you talk about historically, you know, we looked at the technology to, you know, type faster and to be able to edit our work, but the move to the Web 2.0 technologies and the interaction really opens up all kinds of opportunities. The students can self-publish now, and that really is empowering the students once they can see their work up there for everyone else to see.
Well, self-publishing and inquiry, and I know here in a minute I'm going to screen share some stuff that I actually haven't even blogged or shown. I mean, I'm going to show you some things. I don't know if you're ready to do that now. That can give you a great example of what happens. I've got a couple of examples from today that I'd like to show you that you can kind of see what happens when students get excited. It's really it's transformational when you really move to a more inquiry model where you still got your objectives, you still got your standards, you still got all your things you're trying to accomplish, but you really allow students to, I guess, challenge-based learning. Some people may call it problem-based learning, project-based learning. Those are all terms that kind of fit what I do in my classroom.
Vicki, it really requires a change of mindset. And what do you say to those teachers, as you mentioned that, you know, you don't do enough worksheets, you know, your classroom's not quiet enough, how do we begin to change teachers who aren't willing to open up and empower their students?
Well, you know, one thing I always tell teachers when I travel and speak is there's only one person you can change in your district, and that's you. That's it. I can change my classroom. I can't change anybody else. Now, when the kids start getting excited and they go into the other classrooms and start doing really cool things, it will creep into other classrooms. And those teachers, once they start seeing what the kids can do, I had a teacher who recently assigned a magazine cover project. She was amazed with what the kids could do. Well, I've never taught them how to, quote, make a magazine cover, but they know how to do different tools so they could figure it out. They didn't need me to do it. I've taught them how to find apps. You know, in early 9th grade, we'll do word processors, which is Word, Google Docs, and then I'll have them find one other word processor, and they have to create a Venn diagram on classtools.net comparing the 3 different word processors, and the third one they found. So a lot of times I give them tasks, and I'll say, okay, in 8th grade, you will make a timeline on the 10 most important events of your life, and you will embed it on your blog to share with the rest of the class. I don't tell them what to make their timeline on. I tell them that they need to make a timeline, and I teach them how to find the tools to solve that problem to be able to do that. Now, I'll teach them how to embed. I teach them a little bit about blogging, but you know, it's just a different model of teaching. But you cannot push somebody up a ladder. If they don't want to climb, they're not going to get there. And here's the thing. If you want to be an amazing, epic teacher, you better just brace yourself, because you will be criticized. You will have people who don't get it. I have more people who get it now because I've been doing this for pretty much 9 years and doing a lot of really cool stuff. But the first year, The very first project I did with a school overseas, I had somebody go to the principal and say, how could I collaborate with a school from another country because people were going to come through the computer and bomb us? You know, it's like, how does that happen? You know, I don't get that, but that's the kind of criticism you get. So if you're doing anything in this world worth doing, and then the other thing that happens, when kids really get excited and they're learning a lot and they're doing a lot of things, that shakes up this whole idea that many people have that today's students are lazy, today's students don't want to do anything, today's students don't want to work hard. You know, and yes, there are some work ethic issues. I'm seeing it. I think most teachers are seeing it with this generation that and I'm not too convinced that some of these addictive type things that they do in their personal time aren't truly having an impact on their brains. I really think that there's some truth to that. But even so, if you're an amazing teacher, you could get them engaged. You can have things to do that are exciting. And the thing that's great about social media is that you have all of these teachers who are doing great things anyway. Even, you know, people say, I can't do this but. And these are the people that have taken the buts and they are doing it anyway, even though they have all the same buts that other people have. So that's one of the great things about getting on Twitter and getting engaged yourself is you can find people who are doing really cool things and say, you know what, I can do that. I mean, I have a show called Every Classroom Matters. We're probably going to rename it here next week. But and the whole purpose behind that show is to say, you know what, your teacher's doing great things. You can do it too.
That's right. You know, that this can be create a professional learning community. You know, I think just the way that in talking about the self-publishing, you know, it empowers students, but it empowers teachers as well to share ideas. I mean, there are just incredible professional learning resources and networks out there. You don't have to wait 6 months for a week-long workshop in your district. You can pick these things up and start working right now and collaborate with other teachers in doing that.
Well, it's just-in-time teaching, just-in-time learning. I mean, if I want to know how to do something, I so rarely find it out at a conference. The conferences, for me, are a place where you look at the menu and, you know, somebody says, hey, I had filet mignon and it's amazing. And this person says, hey, I had this and it's amazing. So you can't really consume it all at the conference. You're just kind of finding out all the things you like to sample. And I always keep my list of my next 3. What are my next 3 things I really want to do? And then I go back and I learn it and I figure out how to do it. And, you know, maybe 1 out of every 3 I can actually use in my classroom. But if it fits with what we know in the research, for example, for cooperative learning, wikis are the greatest cooperative learning tool ever created. They are. If you get in there and figure out a wiki and really understand what it can do, and a lot of people don't really understand what they can do, but when you understand what they can do, you will forever use a wiki in your classroom. I mean, it's a fantastic tool for really unleashing your students. But you don't have to make all the wiki pages for your students. In fact, on Gamified, I'll show you. I started with 1 wiki page, and some of them have 30 and 40 pages here, and they just have their 3rd day of working on this project today, and it's fantastic what they're doing.
I know you wanted to show us some things. Let's see if we can do that, Vicki. If I can change you to the presenter.
Okay, I'm going to show my screen here.
Screen.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, a couple things here that I'm going to show you guys. First of all, this is just with all the things that you were saying, Richard, this is an article I wrote for Edutopia about grit, and a lot of it shares what I do in my classroom about grit. And there's so many things about grit and growth mindset, and there's so many debates that are happening about it that I just decided to bring my kids on the leading, bleeding edge of research. So I linked to it in that original article. I actually have them take the grit test. I don't tell them what it is, and I just say it's self-scoring. It's not to share with me. We're just going to talk about it. And then we watch the Angela Duckworth video on TED, and we discuss and we talk about grit. Now, one other thing we do talk about, and I think this is real important, I'm going to flip here. This is not really a PowerPoint, but it's kind of a PowerPoint, is that there's a lot of research on resilience, and grit, I believe, is part of resilience, but then you've got support or help, and then you've got hope. So just telling kids to try harder is not the right thing. They need to know what they need to try harder doing. So I'll give the example as we talked today. You don't understand how to do Spanish, you're failing Spanish. Do you just work harder? No. You know, that's kind of like, I don't know if you can still see me, see my video, but it's kind of like doing this and expecting to get better at basketball. It doesn't happen. You have to know what you need to do, and then once you know what you need to do, then you can have hope that having grit, doing those things, will produce the results. So we talk about that. We talk about resilience. We talk about all these things. And then we do a lot in our classroom. Like, for example, we had the Hour of Code back in December, and we wanted all the students to, we decided, I wrote this article for Edutopia. You have to be real careful when you write, because if you write, you might just find yourself saying, you know what, I can't write this unless I'm doing it. So I had found all these ways, 15 ways that you could teach coding to all kids without even having a computer. And I said, you know what, we're not doing it here at Westwood, so we better do it. So I went to my 9th and 10th graders, and I said, you know what, I think I figured out a way we can teach every kid, K-5 through 5th grade in the whole school, how to code, but you're going to do it. And this was the schedule they had. They actually documented what they did. You can save this and go to it later. They had their handout. These are the pictures of what happened, what they did, how they did it. So they documented how they did it. They share it. So this gives them meaning. They edited. They did all this stuff. They decided what to do. They decided how to do their lesson plan. They decided everything. So this gave them a different audience. They had about 2 days to plan it. It was fantastic. Now, the other thing I was talking about that I wanted to mention is the Gamified project. Now, this is a project, my students are partnered with other people here at the school, but we're doing this project with the University of Alaska Southeast, Dr. Lee Graham, and Verena Roberts, and some of her students up in Canada. And we're researching serious games. There's actually a big thing going on starting next week where we're talking about serious games. It's called an OOC. You can go to this website and see all the free webinars we're doing next week. But what I wanted to show you was what happened today on this particular team. Now, this is a higher ed. They're grad students at the University of Alaska. They had made a wiki page, and the wiki page was kind of a little bit not like you typically do a wiki page. So this was their original wiki page here. And my students were reading the wiki page and looking at it. Well, here's the conversation. So the page disappeared, and it looked like this particular page. And my student, Jason, who's in 9th grade, said, I was reading your page, and it disappeared. Was this intentional? Do you need help restoring your page? So here's a 9th grader offering to give a master student help on the wiki. And so this student says, no, we moved the information to discussion and games. We're working on cleaning up the page. And then I commented, I found out what happened. And then here's the grad student says, if you'll help me list the pages, that would be awesome. I'm trying to link pages and can't figure out how. And then he said, thanks. He said, list it. And he said, oh, I want to know how to do it. So now my student is teaching this student how to do it. And they're so excited. The chat feature was neat. And this is the professor saying, I'm so excited seeing the cross-country collaboration with the students. And it's also cross-age and cross all kinds of things. So the students are leaving examples in conversation that's happening. And then I'll just show you one of these teams. Have so many great teams. They've had 3 days to work. You can see on this particular wiki they have quite a few pages here. They're discussing game-based learning in serious games, and they're doing all this amazing research. They're commenting, they're talking. These are teams of about 6 students, collaborating 31 edits on this particular page. And all I did on this, was post these questions. I've actually had 3 questions and 2 quests, but they came back and said, they have project managers, and Akshay came back and said, can I add more questions because simulators really need to be handled separately? And I'm like, you know what, I didn't even think about simulators. That's a great point. So he made it separate, and they're asking these questions, and they're discussing what happens with that. So it's really a very powerful example of what can happen. And there's 93 edits on this page, this home page, that have happened, and it's just crazy. They've embedded a chat. They've done word clouds. They've done all kinds of really cool things. And so this is giving, you know, if you look back, they got the social emotional of working together, giving each other feedback. How do you do that? And coaching students on that. You've got the growth mindset that I already covered. I've already covered the material about grit and stuff. We've got the reflection and thinking that's happening as they're commenting on each other's work, as they're doing all of that. you've got the ability to make a difference, because these students at the end of this month are actually going to be presenting at the OOC that we have. We realized when we started this project that there was not enough material to really talk about serious games in K-12 and higher ed, and we better do something. So Verena Roberts took it upon herself, she's one of the organizers, to organize some of the best people in gamifying and using serious games in K-12 and higher ed to speak to everybody. So we've got all this stuff going on. These are free. They can join in. And then the students are going to be at the end with their smackdown of serious games. And they're actually going to take what they've learned and they're going to share everything they can about serious games. But they're also going to be watching all of these videos as they get there. So this is an example of how you can connect, how you can do all kinds of things. One other thing I want to mention for all of you, this is something all of you can do. Classroom Champions, we've got the Olympics. If you're in a high-needs school, you can apply to have an Olympic athlete, an active Olympic athlete actually assigned to your classroom. But you can also watch all their videos that they have and their lessons that really will help you with teaching a growth mindset. And I'm going to be using some of these videos next week and thought you guys might really want to be interested. So I've talked a lot here. I'm going to give you back the presentation because I've just kind of gone through this. Let me find where to stop sharing my screen here. Go ahead. Do you have any questions or anything?
See if we've got any questions from the audience. I've got a couple, but Gretchen, do we have any questions from the group?
Are they overwhelmed and disappear on us? I'm so sorry. I just went on. But that's just, that gives you a picture of what we're doing right now, this moment. I didn't even show you Physics of the Future, which is another project that meets every ISTE-NET standard. But this just kind of shows you what we're doing with my 9th grade class and how they're collaborating. You can collaborate with anybody, anywhere. So, Richard, what are your questions?
One of the observations, you see how these things interrelate. That you see the students are developing skills along the way, doing some real work, but their whole sense of community changes. This aspect that it's not just doing work for the teacher, they're getting feedback from peers in the collaboration, they're getting feedbacks from other teachers that they interact with. So it changes the whole dynamics of who you're learning from and who you're teaching in this process when you talk about this aspect of empowerment.
It does, and even every week my students turn in a weekly activity report for Gamified, for example, and I actually have them rate their teams on how effective their teams are communicating and how effective their leaders are, and give them a score at the end of the week. Now, that's not for a grade, but it does show them how well their teams are functioning. How well does everybody on your team know what to do? Do you feel like, how does everybody feel like an engaged member of the team? Does every person feel like that they are an important part of this team? And, so you talk about Angela's video and this whole idea of you mattering. Making mattering important is something that you have to do. Otherwise, your team leaders will just run over everybody and have an amazing product. They won't think about, these are the things that need to happen so that people feel like they're important and they know they're a person of worth.
Well, I think the challenge that many teachers have when they begin to get into these kinds of group projects is that some students will take over and they'll demonstrate high quality work, but that you won't be able to bring all of students along. And I think that really goes to the facilitation skills of the teacher to make sure that you're really monitoring the work of all the students along the way.
Yes, and the great thing about wikis, and this is why I love them so much, is that you can actually put in, Adam Fry at Wikispaces put in a facility for teachers where you can put in a username and filter by date and see how many edits are on there. And you can also use Wikispaces Classroom, which shows you how active people are in reading and writing and editing. So you can kind of have a visual measure of how active people are and coach at that moment. You can see if somebody's active or not. And you do have to hold them accountable, but that's one big thing with all of our projects is, I'll say, okay, you need this many edits this week, you need this many comments this week. Next week they have to leave 4 comments on teacher work to give feedback and ask questions. So you do have to hold them accountable. Now the very first week you'll have half of your students who do well, and you'll have the other half who go, I didn't do anything. Do I have to do something? Now they're busy, but they're not actually contributing in a significant way to the project. And then when you start holding them accountable, I saw this in the fall. We did a project called the Arab-Israeli Conflict Simulation with Jeff Stanzler out of the University of Michigan. And their first week, they're supposed to be world leaders, they're supposed to be communicating, they're supposed to be checking their email. And then when they realize, when they turn in their weekly activity report, that they did not respond to the emails, they did not do their job, and you hold them accountable and their grade reflects it, they will turn around, because the best thing I can do for them for their future success in the business world, because I came from the business world, is to hold them accountable. And like you said, you don't say you're smart. Honestly, all the students I teach have the intellect to do the work that I have. But wow, you worked hard today. You did an amazing job. Look how you used your time. That was a very strategic way to spend your time. It was really smart to spend your time using it that way. That was a wise way to spend your time today. Or that was very helpful of you to go and to help. So you want to praise. These are the things that I want to see in a high-functioning team. And your strongest students that tend to be the A students are the ones who really need leadership coaching. Just because they're an A student doesn't mean they're a leader. We're full of schools with people who were the smartest, and so they're sitting in the front office, and they don't know how to lead people. That helping people feel like they're somebody of worth and being the kind of person that somebody wants to work with and for, that, you talk about a 21st century skill, that's a eternity skill, that people want to work with you. So you want to help people, because some of those students that are the stronger students maybe who would rather work by themselves, they're so overbearing nobody wants to work with them. It was interesting. I had one boy, I usually let them volunteer to be project manager and assistant project manager. We call it PM and APM. And one boy signed up to be a PM, and nobody signed up for his team. Well, it was because last time he was PM, he behaved in a way that made people not want to work with him. And you know what? He actually demoted himself and said, you know what? I'm going to go over to this team and help them. And he's an APM on a team with one of our strongest leaders from the last time. And now he's learning from that really strong leader that everybody wanted to work for, okay, this is what it takes to be a good leader. And I think next time he leads, he's going to be less likely to put people down and to be the kind of person people don't want to work for. So, but they're in 9th grade and they're learning these lessons. And my classroom is so much better for it. I wear a Fitbit, and so I actually see how many steps I take. And, I know it's a good class if I've taken 800 to 1,000 steps, because my room is kind of in a circle, and I'm just going around and around and around and around and around and around. And how are you? And are you doing this? And do you have a question? And can I help you? And it's more, oh, that's a good way to spend your time, or that's, it's not really the 1-minute manager or the 1-minute teacher, but it's really just, I'm just helping, I'm kind of like the oven that turns up the heat, but they made the recipe and they mixed it together,
Well, I think it's the facilitation skills that it takes, and you do need to check for feedback and understanding in the work that the students are doing. Going back to what you said earlier this afternoon about the teacher that just wants to hand in the worksheets and see who's got the right answers on the worksheet, that becomes a very concrete and comfortable way to monitor student progress, but it's not very engaging and doesn't drive the real learning. And so I think sometimes for a teacher like that, it's hard to see the facilitation that goes on to really make sure students are learning. And that's the style that it really takes as a teacher to make this work.
Well, they do need to take notes. My next book is Reinventing Writing. It comes out in May. And I believe every school and every student and every learner should have their own digital notebook that is with them on every device. I use Evernote for mine. I've got a student using Evernote now. I'm trying to get enough money to buy Evernote for the whole school, because they do need to be held accountable for taking notes. But I have two of my kids have LDs, and scanning is very hard for a lot of kids who have an LD. scanning and filling in lines on a worksheet. It's amazing how many kids cannot do that. It's very hard to, now I can because I can speed read, but, you know, I'm very weak on the auditory. So, you know, we ask kids to do these things that don't necessarily teach. It makes us feel good, and we think, oh, they filled in the bucket. That means they know it. Yeah. Just because they can scan it and find it on a page and fill it in. Honestly, I could really go on a rant about worksheets because I think that they are kind of like, you know, me putting on a name tag and calling myself a desk. I am not a desk because I put on a name tag and call myself a desk. You are not teaching because they fill out a worksheet. In fact, I call them worksheet wonders. Some of the teachers that are the biggest worksheet wonders I know are the worst teachers I have ever seen in my life. They can't hold a classroom. They don't focus. They don't teach the main thing. The kids know nothing. They just fill out worksheets. You know, there's this old movie about teachers where the guy is at his desk reading a paper, and the kids come in, they pick up a worksheet, they do all of the work. They, at the end of the class, the bell rings, they put the worksheet back on his desk, and the guy's been behind a paper the whole time. Well, the guy was dead, and they didn't even know
I remember
it.
That movie, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
right.
like, why are we doing this? I mean, there's a place for worksheets, and I mean, I have some on my desk that I've used. I use them more for taking notes and stuff. It's kind of a guide of these are the main points we're going to cover today. Make sure you have something under each of them. But you can also type it and take it in your iPhone. You can take it in your iPad. I don't care how you take your notes, but I want you to have the bullets of what we're going to cover so you know my objectives. That's really my reason, especially if I have words that are hard to spell. I don't want to stop and spell those words, and you know, and so I'll put them on there. But I don't really consider that a worksheet of, you know, fill in the blank. You know, 1776. I mean, I don't know. I guess there's a place for that. But if it's all you do, I wouldn't only do wikis. I wouldn't only make movies. I wouldn't only use Evernote and take notes. But I also wouldn't only do worksheets. And if you're only doing worksheets, you just need to ask about that.
Vicki, logistics here. Did you give me back the screen? Make me the presenter again. You stopped showing your screen.
Okay, let me make sure that I do that for you. There you go, so we can finish up.
Oh, there we go. All right.
You're cutting out a little on me somehow. It might be me.
Can you hear me all right now?
Hey, Dick, it's Gretchen. Your audio is getting really choppy, so if you want to, like, disconnect for a second and reconnect, maybe.
Okay. I've reconnected there. Can you hear me all right now?
Yes.
Okay, that's better. Just great examples, Vicki, that you've shared with us, and obviously incorporating the technology, and that's a lot of what you do. Suggestions as to where you would suggest a teacher to begin. Obviously, you're doing a lot and really have your students empowered. If a teacher that hasn't done much of this or hasn't done much with the technology, where would you suggest they begin?
My suggestion is always have the next 3 things you want to learn. So if you've heard the word blog and you think, you know what, this might can fit with who I am, then investigate blogging and take a look at some of the best practices. Follow people like Linda Yolis on Twitter. Create a professional Twitter account. You don't have to get into Twitter to use it professionally, but you can follow people. You can send me a message at CoolCatTeacher. You know, type at CoolCatTeacher. Vicki, I'm real interested in, you know, using the flipped classroom model or screencasting, or I'm real interested in just having my students email me their assignments or using a Dropbox to submit their assignments. But just take a small step because, you know, I started with wikis, and I did that for a whole month before I did anything else. And in some people it takes longer, and they just say, you know, I'm going to do wikis, and I'm going to try it for a year and see what I think. But there's so many things that you can do. But most of you have probably heard a few terms. I think the thing is we're asking students to learn something new every day. Are we willing to let them see us learn something new? So it's okay to say, you know, I want to see them see me try new things. You know, I found this website, you know, classtools.net is a great place to start. It's one of my favorite. It's made by a history teacher in France named Russell Tarr. And it's one of my favorite tools for beginners because any teacher can find a graphic organizer. There's something called Fakebook that's its most popular. So you don't have to have access to social media to have your students, you know, what would Napoleon Bonaparte tweet if he could tweet? You know, what would his Facebook page look like? Who would his friends be? Who are his contemporaries? What would they say? What would he say on different dates? What would his status update be over the last 10 years of his life? What are the things he would say and do? So Fakebook on classtools.net is a great place to start in very simple ways. Of course, a lot of us are using rubrics like on Rubistar and other places like that. But and then start by connecting yourself. You're doing it right now because you're in this webinar. So you're doing it now. But take it one step further and say, you know what, I'm going to get on Twitter. Just set one goal. What is it? What's the next thing I'm going to try? And then bring it to your classroom because there are teachers doing a lot of great things that will help you improve learning in your classroom. You don't have to go all out and buy a 3D printer to do something exciting. You could just use class tools in a class or something.
Great suggestions, and I like the notion of modeling the learning. I often tell a story about Robert Mager was one of the noted educators back in the dark ages when I went through my teacher preparation. Wrote a book on behavioral objectives and how you write objectives. But I had a chance many years ago to see him at a conference, and he was up in front of an audience of 500 people playing the banjo. And he played a simple piece on the banjo, and he went on to explain that as an educator, he never wanted to forget what it was like to learn something new. And so in the past year, he'd learned how to play the banjo.
Wow.
And I think that we need to model that for our students. With this technology, it's changing all the time, and we need to recognize that there's no one expert that knows it all. And we all want to think about how we can learn from that and use those tools to enhance our own learning.
Yes, and you know, there's one other piece of this, and that is, you know, teachers have really taken it hard. A lot of people have criticized teachers and talk about, you know, and all it takes is one bad teacher, and then people just want to, and as a profession, the exciting thing that's happening through social media is that teachers are saying, you know what, we're a noble profession. This is a great profession. Well, we're doing amazing things, and exciting things are happening, and we're going to show you who we really are instead of this news media depicted, you know, teacher that is not the kind of person that any of us are. So that's the exciting thing about connecting online is that you can remember why you got in this business, because it's not really a business, it's really a work of heart.
Yeah, a work of heart, just a great phrase. I want to thank you for your contributions today. Just some real, I want to be in your classroom. I mean, just really exciting things that you're sharing, and you really are empowering students and getting them to use the technology in a way that they're taking hold of their learning. And that's what this element is all about in rethinking that aspect of learning. I want to remind the audience about the purpose of developing this model is really to get teachers to reflect about instruction. And to do that, we've created these 6 teacher surveys that focus our practices around each of the actions in the elements. They're separate surveys. They're not an evaluation. They really are a tool for you to think about your own instruction. And if you're thinking you're providing some efforts of empowering students, sit down and take the survey, and it will provide you with a customized report of what are some suggestions of things that you can work on, that you're really beginning to think about your practice. You can go to the Technical Assistance Center website to take those surveys. It's in the Career Instructional Model. And for those of you that aren't from New York State, I've got the website up here for the Career Readiness Institute that we're creating, and so you've got access to these surveys as well. I mentioned, or I need to mention the additional resources that we put together, and Vicky's given me some additional that I'm going to have to add to this list. If you want to try and look at some videos or read some materials or articles that support each of these elements. This is a great effort to try and focus on increasing student career readiness. The webinars are all going to be recorded and online, so you could use these with your colleagues if you want in your school. We have one more remaining in the survey, the series. That will be next week on February 11th. Got one last poll question that I'd like to ask the group that are assembled here. Gretchen, you want to pull that up and ask the poll question about using the surveys and resources that you might like to see as we continue to share resources around these. What would be useful to you to continue to expand your knowledge about the model? You can make multiple choices there and submit that. Video examples. We've seen that in previous sessions. People want to see more of this in some videos. And some online discussion. That reflects some of the things we talked about in using Twitter and blogs and some online discussions to support that. So we will look to try and continue to do that. I've had a lot of fun the last several months working with the surveys and the ways that those can be used to enhance professional development and stimulating this aspect of reflection. I want to thank those of you that tuned in to watch this today, and Vicki, particularly to thank you for taking the time. You've had a busy day at school today, and appreciate you doing this for us at the end of the day to share some of your thoughts and practice. So thank you very much for your contribution today.
Glad to be here.
Great. Wish you all survival for the rest of the winter. It seems like every week we're talking about storms and cold weather, but spring is coming soon. Everyone have a good day.
Okay, thanks. I'll talk to you later. I've got to run. I've got another thing at 5 online, so I've got to get ready.
Thank you, Vicki.
Catch you later. Okay, bye.
Bye.